It's been a little over a week since I have arrived at this tower. If I were to be honest, this life really isn't for the faint of heart. The solitude that was once a welcomed respite from the hustle and bustle of civilization was starting to take its toll on me. Humans are social creatures by nature, and if it wasn't for my coworkers in Towers 7 and 9 respectfully, I might have begun to lose my mind. I'm being a tad overdramatic, of course. There is fairly extensive psychological assessment in jobs such as these, at least for the organization I work for. I wouldn't have come all the way out here if I didn't think I could handle it. That being said, thinking back on what I had experienced on my first night, I honestly thought a screw might have come loose somewhere in my mind. There was obviously no creepy man creature carrying a lantern around the forest. I was randomly stirred awake in the middle of the night, and in my overly groggy state, my brain fabricated this person from the darkest reaches of my imagination. That's what I've been telling myself, at least. In the days since then, I haven't experienced another nightly visitor. This only seemed to reinforce my belief that it was a figment conjured by fatigue. I have, however, spotted that odd red light moving in the woods at night. I didn't see it every single night, and on the nights that I did, I tried my best to dismiss it. Probably one of the other watchers investigating the surrounding area. As unlikely as that thought sounded, it did help to calm me down for the most part. The days that passed have been largely uneventful. Thankfully, I had the foresight to bring along a few books to read with all the downtime. I spent the majority of my time just relaxing in the tower, reading and chatting with my tower friends. Whenever I did leave the safety of the tower, I never traveled too far. I always stayed within visual range of it at all times, never extending myself farther than my sprinting capacity would allow. While I had no particular reason to investigate my surroundings, it was a nice change of pace from the confines of the glass walls. On the 6th day out there, the same man who had dropped me off at the tower showed up to deliver some supplies. Of course, I had brought enough rations to last my entire stay out here, but the wildlife reserve was sure to keep the tower decently stocked. I'll be honest, seeing him was a much welcomed sight. We chatted for a bit, and while he was as stern and as quiet as ever, I still enjoyed his company. He asked me how things were going out here, and I assured him that everything was fine. He unloaded a few boxes from the back of his truck before heading off to Tower 9 to deliver the last of the supplies. I thanked him for the items, and again, he disgustingly cleared his throat, nodded to me, and drove off. On the 7th night, I was lounging on the outer rim of the tower, staring up at the beautiful night sky above. I was finishing up the last bit of soup I had made earlier, when my eyes drifted from the partially cloudy sky to the forest below. In the forest, I could see that glow once again. It drifted between and around multiple trees. Honestly, it became such a common occurrence that I didn't think too much about it. It drifted farther and farther away from my tower. Eventually, I picked up my binoculars and looked at it. Typically, that light only remained illuminated for a short period of time, a few minutes max. This time it didn't. The dull glow lingered and drifted along. I dropped my binoculars and looked back up at the sky, utterly disregarding it. Then, around 20 minutes later, my radio in the tower crackled to life. It was Peter from Tower 7. He was asking if either of us were still awake. I stood up from my chair and moseyed inside, responding to his message. He was asking if either of us could see this weird red light outside of his tower. Katie didn't respond. We just thought she had gone to bed for the night. I, on the other hand, stared at the receiver. I'm not sure why I was so concerned in that moment. It was just a random light in the woods. It wasn't something to be terrified of. However, the fact that Peter was validating something I had personally experienced seemed to send a chill down my spine. I responded truthfully to Peter, telling him that I've been seeing that light intermittently ever since I arrived at the tower. He asked me why I never reported it, and honestly, I just told him because I thought it was one of them. He then asked me if I thought he should go investigate it, to which I advised against. I told him just to lock his tower's door and remain inside for the night. He seemed mildly concerned about the situation, but I feel after speaking with me, he managed to compose himself. He mentioned that he was heading to bed, and I did the same. At roughly 2:30 in the morning, I was awoken by the distant sound of a gunshot echoing across the forest. In any other circumstance, there would have been no way I could have heard something like that. But after that first night, and the conversation I had with Peter earlier, I went to sleep on a razor's edge. I probably could have heard a pin drop a mile away, so a gunshot was more than enough to pull me from my dreams. I quickly sat up and grabbed the radio, asking what had happened, but in the back of my mind, I already knew that one of my tower mates probably encountered the same thing I did, though I honestly didn't want to believe it. After a few painstaking minutes passed by, Peter's voice poured through the speaker. He said that he saw something climbing up his tower. He sounded panicked and distraught. He said that when it was going for his tower's door, he grabbed his shotgun and fired at it. Once the smoke cleared, however, there was no sign of it anywhere, just a pile of broken glass. He cursed himself for making such a rash decision. He went to see if whoever it was had fallen from the tower. When he walked outside and looked over the edge, there was nothing. Nobody, and no sign anyone had been outside of his tower. Since then, Peter has been making nightly radio checks to both me and Katie. His decision to fire his gun left him without a window in his tower. The thin barrier that protected him from the elements outside had been torn down, and I think that realization was starting to set in. The night following that event, as I stood on the balcony looking around, I saw no sign of that dull red glow in the forest below. It was truly as if it had never existed in the first place. I felt at peace once more to not have this feeling in the back of my mind. However, something happened last night that I feel needs to be addressed. I was using the outhouse late one evening at the base of the tower. I stepped outside and was about to make my way back up when I heard something. It sounded like heavy footsteps moving in the trees next to me, like something large was shuffling around. Even with my flashlight cutting through the darkness, there was no sign of anything in the woods. My first instinct was that it was a bear coming to forage in this area at night for potential food. I continued to scan around, as an unsettling sensation began to creep in the back of my mind. Similar to when I would spot that glowing red light, however, this time felt different. It felt darker, more ominous, dangerous. I was trying to force my legs to sprint up the tower as fast as I could, but I found myself unable to move. I continuously shifted my light around, hoping and praying I wouldn't see anything out of the ordinary, when suddenly, the loud cracking of twigs to my right sent me into a mad dash up the stairs. I had never climbed a set of stairs that fast in my life before. When I arrived at the top, I locked the door and stayed awake the entire night, with the shotgun resting comfortably nearby. This morning, when I went downstairs to survey the surrounding area, I saw where that noise had been made. A large tree, which had been no further than 6 feet away from me at the time, had a bunch of broken twigs at its base. There were large scratch marks embedded into the tree itself, and in the soft ground below were 2 footprints. They appeared strangely human, albeit slightly longer. The indent that had been left in their wake seemed to signify something heavy left those prints. I don't know if this had been made by the thing that carried that lantern, or if it's something different entirely. All I know is, there is something strange happening in these woods, and I feel like myself and the other watchers are bystanders caught in the middle of it. We still have another 20 days left in these woods, and I just hope we can make it to the end before something truly bad happens.